Good morning, everybody. We're in the book of John, chapter 11. We're going to do the second part of the raising of Lazarus. I've been spending a lot of time focusing on Jesus' authority, and so I really want to clarify that how we think of authority. I don't think we think of it in the fullness that Christ exhibits it. And so if I were to give an example here of, I get frustrated sometimes because people drive down 191 very fast, right? And I want to go out there and put up a sign that says, like, slow down, put the speed limit where I want it, right? But I don't have that authority, right? Somebody else has that authority. I'm not allowed to go out there and put up a street sign. They'll come and tear it down. I'll probably get in trouble, right? I don't have that authority over something very, very small, right? But God has given Jesus authority of some very big things. And so as we're kind of looking at this, he's going to be raising Lazarus from the dead, and we see that Jesus has authority over life and death itself, right? And this is a tremendous responsibility. It's not something so easy as flipping a light switch off and on, right? And there's consequences for what he does. He can't just do whatever, right? And I think sometimes we take this very lightly, and we don't see the fullness of what Jesus is doing here, especially as we see him weeping. It's kind of hard to understand. Why is he weeping? He can just bring the guy back from the dead. What's the problem, right? This is like no big deal. Why is he upset, right? Well, it's not so simple. It's not that simple. And so we're going to dive in here. I'm going to read the rest of this. Where we left off, Martha had already encountered Jesus. This is Mary and Martha, the two sisters of Lazarus. Martha had already encountered Jesus outside of town, and had asked him the question of, like, Lord, where were you? You could have come and saved him. He was sick. You could have healed him, right? And so he dealt with that last week. And so we're picking up on verse 20. I believe it's 28. My glasses are not working here. 26 or 28. When she had said this is Martha. She went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone laid against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary, had seen what he did, believed in him, but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was a high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." He did not say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. Jesus, therefore, no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there to the region near the wilderness to a town called Ephraim, where he stayed with the disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and many went up to the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They were looking for Jesus and saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think, that he will not come to the feast at all?" Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know so that they might arrest him. Okay, so remember we just had this encounter between Martha and Jesus where Martha asked that same question that Mary asked of like, why you could have healed him? Like, what you love my brother Lazarus? Like, why didn't you come? And oftentimes we ask that kind of question of God too. We don't understand why something is the way it is, and we just, because our reasoning doesn't allow us to get to the conclusion, we just ask God, like, where were you? How could this happen? Right? And so Martha, who maintained her faith, but showed that she just couldn't understand, she's asking him, like, why didn't you come? You know? And so in verse 28, we see Mary asking the same question, we're picking up in 28. So Martha calls for her sister in private. She says, the teacher is here and is calling for you. We have to remember this is a very somber scene. Lazarus has been dead. He was a beloved guy. Everybody loved him, and they're really just kind of torn apart, right? And we have to kind of feel that heaviness as we read this, that everyone is just beyond belief sad. And then on top of this, they know Jesus who could have come and healed them. It didn't have to happen, right? And Jesus intentionally stayed. They called for him. They tried to get him to come, and he didn't come. If he would have come, Lazarus would be alive. And so they're really feeling the heaviness of this. So Mary, who's being called by Martha, she hears it and she rises quickly to go to him. And so Mary demonstrates obedience here, even in her lack of understanding, just like Martha did, right? She's coming quickly to the Lord. And I pray that we have the same kind of faith that when things are overwhelming and we don't understand, that we will rise quickly and go to the Lord. He's the one that can answer us, or maybe we don't get an answer, but he's the one that we can trust in implicitly. Now, Jesus had not yet come to the village, but he was still in the place where Martha had met him. So these interactions take place away from where the people are gathered, right? And so that's an important detail. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now, remember when John says Jews, he's talking about the religious authorities, right? The leaders, right? He wrote this for a Gentile audience primarily. And so when he says Jews, he doesn't mean all Jewish people. He means the leaders specifically. Now, when Mary came to where Jesus was and she saw him, she fell at his feet saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Okay? And we got to remember, like in our minds, this is for us too. We tend to see death as final. This is the end. There's no going back, right? And if only Jesus had been here, he wouldn't have died. And so we give the authority of death to something else, right? Jesus is not the one that has the authority over this situation. Okay, we recognize at this point that he's got authority over sickness. He can heal sickness, but there is a greater authority, death, right? And we have this same conflict in our own minds, that we see death as this like mysterious, nebulous thing that it's going to come and get you at some point, right? We all have to face this at one point or another. It could come at any time, right? And it's something we fear. It's something we dread. It's not something we understand. We don't even want to think about it, but there is like this power to it that controls us, right? And we don't see that Jesus has authority in this domain. So they say, okay, he can heal people, but now that he's dead, it's over. There's a higher authority to Jesus is what is really coming out of that. Verse 33, when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. Jesus knows what's going to happen. He knows that he can raise Lazarus from the dead, right? But if it were so simple, this would be a trivial matter, and he'd be like, hey, don't be upset. We can just bring him back to life. And then he comes back to life, right? But it's not that simple. Life and death are very serious things. We don't understand this, and that's okay, right? But there are consequences for these things. There's reasons why we have to die, right? And Jesus can't just bring everybody back to life. He can't just do that. He will do that on the last day. There will be a great resurrection, but it's not so simple. He has that authority. We are far, far below him in that authority, and we're subject to this authority, right? And so it's almost like if they're a rich person, they can't just go around handing out $1 million to everybody, right? Because for a lot of people, that would be very destructive for them, right? And so there has to be discretion, and there's responsibility that's attached to this authority, and it is a very serious matter. And he was loved, and he's gone. Ultimately, just like with the blind beggar, the whole purpose of the sickness and Lazarus' death are to reveal God's glory, and that's going to happen. But Jesus is not rejoicing at this point. He's weeping, right, with these people because he feels their pain. He understands. One of the greatest things, the glory that just pours out from Jesus being God in the flesh, is that he came and experienced life as a human. So he feels the same kind of pain that we feel. And so when there's loss like this of this guy Lazarus, he feels that pain. He knows what's going on in people's minds. He senses their doubt, their frustration, their anger, all that stuff. He's just immersed in all of that stuff, and he's human. He's 100% human. He's also 100% God, but he's 100% human. So he feels that very deeply, and he is going to experience this with him. And I would say, as we consider, why is Jesus upset? Because he could just bring this guy back to life. Can you imagine if he was just callous and insensitive and hey, guys, no big deal. We got this, right? No, it's very serious. This is a very serious thing. And I'll say it had to be this way, right? The prize here is the revelation of God's glory. And we get to experience that as well. And reading this passage, we get some of that as well. This is something that has gone... the glory has been flowing from this incident for 2,000 years. It's just pouring out, and it was worth it, right? Even though it's very trying and difficult, it was worth it. And we can think of that with our own trials and tribulations in life, not realizing there's opportunity for God to reveal his glory, that it doesn't just stop with us, right? When someone else sees God glorified in our lives, it changes people at a very deep level, and then they can experience some of this as well. This is one of the great ways that God shows his truth, the reality of his existence, is through us and how we handle our circumstances. Verse 34, and he said, "Where have you laid them?" And they said to him, "Lord, come and see." And then Jesus wept. He wept because death is horrible. It wasn't supposed to be this way, right? It wasn't supposed to be this way. Humans were not meant to come into this world and just die. This is horrible. This is a consequence of the fall in the garden. And Jesus is here. He's God, experiencing life as a human. And this is such a critical point. Because if we had this God way up high, sitting in his throne, way smarter than we could ever be, way more wise than we could ever imagine, and he's sitting up there, he can't understand what it's like for us, right? And so for him to judge us, we could say, God, you don't understand. I have all these limitations. I've got this fleshy body, the temptations constant. You don't understand what it's like to be a human. Well, he does, because he came as a human, right? He experienced all the temptations that we experience. He experienced all the suffering that we experience. He knows us at a very intimate level, and that's such a critical thing. And that's one of the reasons he's worthy, that was mentioned in the song, to be the judge of the world, because he came and he experienced all this for himself. His grieving should be a relief to us. He doesn't just put us through trials and tribulations. He came and experienced them himself, right? There's none of this God, you don't understand. It's so hard. I have a very hard time. Well, he went through worse than we dealt with. So he understands completely. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. Now, some of these religious authorities are starting to see Jesus' humanity, right? And so here's some of that glory kind of coming forth. So some of his enemies are starting to turn, right? They're starting to see like, wow, okay, this guy really loved Lazarus. He wouldn't have done this if there wasn't some reason, right? He wouldn't have put everybody through this. Look at how painful this is for them. Verse 37, but some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Okay, some people are never satisfied. They will always question. If there's any possible room for doubt, regardless of the amount of evidence, they will go to the doubt and they will hang out in the doubt. Jacques was just talking about this. When we see evidence of creation all over the place, and people will find some reason to doubt. And as long as they've got one little reason, despite a sea of evidence otherwise, they will cling to that one reason. Why? Because they don't want to believe, right? That's the truth. When you have a doubting mind, it's because you don't want to believe. And you'll turn away from the evidence and you will look at the doubt. They acknowledge, however, in saying this, when they say, if he opened the eyes of this blind man, couldn't he have kept this guy from dying? They're acknowledging that Jesus did heal the blind man. Okay, so that's a big deal. They too are giving death a higher authority than Jesus, right? They're saying, couldn't he have healed this guy while he was still alive? But now that he's dead, it's over. It's done. Nothing can be done to fix this. It's over because death is the ultimate authority. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Now, what's interesting is I was digging into this. It's like most people would not honor this request, right? There was like a casket being lowered into the ground. And somebody said, hey, pull that casket back up. We were like, what are you talking about? This is very unusual, right? And so there's some reaction to this. But remember, Jesus speaks with authority, right? He speaks with authority. And so, people are going to kind of do what he says because of the way he speaks. His presence is one of great authority, is one sent from God. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. Perfect. This is necessary. This isn't some trick, right? It's not like Jesus and his buddy Lazarus plotted this out and hey, Lazarus, take some granola bars and go hang out in there for a little while. I'll come in 4 days and I'll say, Lazarus, come out. And then it's a spectacle. This is not a spectacle. It's real. And so that odor, the worse it is, the better, right? Everybody can tell this guy is dead, right? So when the stone rolls away, they will know. And the odor of decomposition is unmistakable. Everyone is going to recognize that Lazarus is really dead. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you if you believed you would see the glory of God? And then we've got to be very careful with this verse, okay? Because some people will see, if you believed you would see the glory of God, some people will put the authority of circumstances or the things that happen in life is conditional on your belief. And I want to emphasize that God is ultimately sovereign, regardless of your level of faith, regardless of your level of belief. It does not depend on us. God is not depending on our belief in order to do something. When God reveals his glory, our capacity for belief grows. And that's going to happen in this case. There's some doubt here, maybe not doubt, but Martha is she doesn't understand. Right? When Jesus said that he's the resurrection and he's the life, she's like, yeah, I know on the last day that everybody's going to come back, right? She couldn't understand or comprehend that there's a way to bring Lazarus back from the death now, right? It can happen right now. Jesus has that authority. Why we have to be so careful with this is there can be this subversive, this sounds evil, but it's because our own understanding is so limited, our own faith is limited, we can kind of try to hijack God's sovereignty, and this can lead to some really dysfunctional things, right? If you have a sick person and you pray over them, you can put all this pressure on yourself. If I just believe, if I believe more, then God will heal this person. Yes, the belief is good, and to have a deeper, stronger faith is fantastic. That's something we should all pursue. However, the healing of that person is not conditional on your level of faith, right? And in this case, this is like an excellent example. Here, Lazarus is sick. There's all kinds of people praying for him, and he dies anyway, right? Should they be like, oh, my faith wasn't enough? It's not them. They don't have the authority to bring Lazarus back or to heal him. Their prayers can be heard, but it has to be in alignment with God's will. So when we are in fervent prayer, praying for something, it has to align up with God's will, or he won't do it, right? And sometimes it's God's will to let someone pass, and that's just how it is. And we have to accept it, even if we don't understand it. We need to have faith in his perfect will, not faith in our own belief, right? That's where we get into this like trap of I have faith in my belief. If I have enough faith, I'll make this happen. Well, it's not really up to us. And we should find peace in this, right? That it's not up to me. If things were depending on our faith, our belief, we would be in trouble. Oh, the pallet. There's a pallet in there. It fell over. If things depended on our level of faith, we couldn't get it done. And there'd be all kinds of problems, right? Like if I'm praying for something, I want it so bad, and then it doesn't happen, like, and it was needed, is it my fault that it didn't happen? No, because it's God's will, right? And I have to embrace that, accept it, that sometimes things are not going to go the way I want them to. God has something better. It's something far better than what I could have wanted. And so my reasoning doesn't always allow for me to see the beauty of God's plan. And so sometimes you get a no. What Jesus is saying here is you need to trust me, right? I know what I'm doing, right? She's saying there's gonna be an odor, there's gonna be this problem, blah, 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 blah. And he's saying you need to trust me, right? I know what I'm doing. So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always heard me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. So this is a public prayer of thanksgiving that puts the focus on God and not on Jesus, right? Remember, this is not a spectacle. As we talked before in some of the previous miracles that Jesus did, like the walking on water, right? They could have had it in the arena, and they could have made a big deal out of this, like, come see the man who walks on water, and have 10,000 people cheering, and wow, this is amazing. No, he did it just for a handful of people, right? He does things in a very understated way, right? People of the world who are chasing after prideful things, they want to maximize the effect or the drama, right? Where there's like minimum content, minimum reality, like a magician, right? The magician comes in, they put on a big show, but it's all fake, right? Everybody oohs and ahs, like, how did he do that? It's so amazing. Wow. And it's some trick. It's not real. If you saw the trick, you would not be impressed. You'd be like, oh, that's it, right? But it's totally the opposite with Jesus. He minimizes everything because it's not about him. It's about revealing the glory of God. So he gets out of the way as much as possible. The trouble with this is people misunderstand it completely, right? When he is, I call this divine humility or divine meekness. He lowers himself to the absolute bottom, and people think less of him because he's not chasing after pride. He's not trying to impress anybody. He doesn't need to impress anybody because he is who he says he is. He has no need to show off, right? I think of, when I was in like middle school, the kids were very desperate to wear the very expensive like Tommy Hilfiger clothing, right? They always had to have some brand name, Nike or something like that. And they were trying to be something that they weren't, right? And so they really had to try for that. Well, I had a friend, his family was actually pretty wealthy, right? But that guy, the kid, Ryan, he never wore a brand name clothing. He wore nice clothes. But he was never advertising to promote himself, right? He just had nice clothes, a nice polo shirt and some khaki slacks, and they were good quality, probably Lands' End or something, right? There's not showing off a brand like, I'm so awesome because of the clothes I'm wearing. In truth, he had a family that had really good character, and that was one of the reasons that they had some wealth, is because they demonstrated good character. And so what a blessing to come from a family that has that going on within it. Well, Jesus has got this to the max, right? He's not trying to impress anybody. He is who he says he is. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Okay, this is not magic. He's not using an incantation, right? He's not saying a bunch of magic words, abracadabra, and like poof, and then Lazarus comes back to life, right? The only thing he says is to tell Lazarus, like, okay, come out, right? And so this miracle happened in an unspoken way. It wasn't the command, "come out," that brought Lazarus back to life. And this is very similar to the healing of the blind beggar, where he rubbed mud in the guy's eyes, right? The healing comes from some other place. It's coming from his authority, right? It's not a physical thing. It's not an incantation. It's not magic, okay? It's coming from his authority in the spiritual realm. And what's demonstrated here is that Jesus is responsible for the connection of your body to your spirit, right? There's like an assignment of your spirit, which has a unique identity to your body. There's a physical and spiritual connection. And so when you're conceived, your spirit is assigned to that physical body. Now, when you die, that's the separation of your spirit from your physical body. And Jesus has authority over all of this stuff, right? And he can make that connection. He can sever the connection. He can reconnect it if he wants. And he even, what's very remarkable, as we're going to find out shortly, he has the ability to do this even for himself. Even if he is killed and his body is separated from his spirit, he has the ability to reconnect it, right? And that's what's so remarkable about this. That demonstrates an authority we can't understand, right? I don't know how to, I can't get out here and put a street sign up, right? Without getting in big trouble, and it wouldn't match the road protocols anyway, right? It would be real obvious that Dave went out and painted a sign, right? It looked like a 4-year-old did it. So he's able to do something fantastically beyond our comprehension, okay? But what this does is it takes that like anomalous, mysterious death thing, and it puts it under Christ. Instead of it being its own chaotic, scary thing that we just can't understand it and it's coming for us and we're afraid of it, we have to recognize that Jesus has authority over this connection between the body and the spirit. And that's a really good thing. It's not chaos controlling it. It's Jesus. And he talked about this very thing in the last chapter. He says in John 10, "For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father." So he has been delegated the authority to do this thing, connecting the connection between the soul, the body and the spirit. We hate death. We fear death. We resent that we have to die. It's something that troubles us greatly, right? And a lot of times we just put it out of our minds, right? Because we can't process it. And when I say that it was never meant to be this way, well, you have been granted existence, right? You as an individual, you're a unique individual who has been ordained existence from the creator of the universe. And to think of that terminating terrifies us above anything and everything else. It scares us to death, right? Like we're just terrified that this is coming for me at some point. I don't know when. I might have a heart attack tomorrow, right? I've already outlived my grandfather, right? He died at 44, and I'm like 2 years past that. I'm like, I can't imagine like that his life was cut so short. And it's like, so that's looming, but we got to have trust and realize that God has a plan here that we don't understand, we can't understand, and we got to stop hating death and loving life, right? We got to love God and walk with him, and then that fear of death goes away, right? He will lose that fear of death because we are eternal beings. There will be a separation between your body and your spirit, right? So that's something, it's like being born and you're curled up in your mother's womb. You don't want to come out of there. It's nice and comfortable. And like, there's a big, scary, ugly world out there, and you got to come out. Well, death, the physical death, is like a birth into your eternal existence. What we should be concerned about is not that so much as where we go upon our death, right? That's what should be really concerning to us. But we can trust in Jesus because of what he did. We can tell from the Gospels that Jesus is trustworthy. He's worthy of this authority, that we can trust him. He's not going to be stingy or bitter or angry, right? Like, I wasn't always a Christian for a long period of my life. I was even an atheist for a while. But Jesus is not going to come to me like, you were an atheist, you're out, right? He came to me at the right time in accordance with God's will, and he took me in, right? And I can just be eternally grateful for that. He's not going to hold it against me. He forgives me of my sins, and you too, right? And so that's the path that we want to be on, is a path that's constantly being refined, constantly being sanctified, on a path getting closer and closer to God, so that when we reach that point of separation between our body and our spirit, that we get to go be with him. And that's a beautiful thing. That's something to rejoice in. And that this guy who is 100% trustworthy is in charge of this stuff. It's not the nebulous, scary, chaotic death, right? That God is in charge of this, and we can trust him. In Romans 5, Paul, the apostle, talks about how Christ died for the ungodly. This is how we know that he's 100% trustworthy. Because people that did not deserve what he did it for them anyway, right? And so Paul says, for one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one could dare even to die. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, right? No human on earth is that righteous to go to their death for us, this motley crew of people that aren't worth it at all. Right? We don't deserve this, but he did it anyway. He did it anyway. And that's how we know that we can trust him, especially when it comes to judgment, to discerning who gets to go be with God and who doesn't. He's 100% trustworthy and reliable. He has 100% integrity. Verse 45, many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. So he's changing the heart even of his enemies. But some of them went to the Pharisees. They're going to run and tell on him, and told what Jesus had done. This is incredibly bad news for the establishment. This Jesus guy, he's not going to stop. He keeps doing these things, these amazing things, and he's like, people are kind of turning to him instead of the Pharisees, right? They're turning to this guy, and this is a huge problem. Word is getting out, and soon they're not going to be able to contain this. Verse 47, so the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. So I want you to see corruption here, the corrupt mind and how it deals with things. We should be celebrating that the Messiah has come. He's healing the sick, right? He's giving sight to the blind, and now he's raising a guy from the dead. This is fantastic. Why is this a bad thing? Well, they're coming up with kind of like reasons why this is a problem. And you see, they recognize that he's legitimate, that he's really doing this. But the problem is, they've kind of got this deal worked out with the Romans. They've been conquered by the Romans, but the establishment is allowed to retain its power and authority within the Jewish system, that they answer to the Romans. If there's some other king that rises up, this is a problem, because he's not in agreement with, he's not under the Roman Empire, right? He's like a rogue leader. He's outside of this. And so Rome is going to come in their minds and stomp on Israel. They're going to come and just destroy them because some other king rose up and they need to be conquered. So that's where their minds are. Now, just like how people were thinking death is above Jesus, they're seeing the Roman Empire as being above Jesus. If this guy comes into power, the Romans are going to come and get us. So who is stronger, Jesus or the Romans? Or the Romans. They think the Romans. And of course, if the Romans come, like all these people are going to die. So we got to kill this guy now because otherwise a bunch of people are going to die and we're going to lose our place. And this is just really bad. So we can't have this. He's got to go. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." He's saying, don't rock the boat. We need to keep things the way they are. The stability of the status quo is more important than the life of one man. But I'll say, like, hey, isn't there like a commandment about killing people? If I could interject that, like one of their 10 commandments, one of our 10 commandments, it says, thou shalt not kill, right? And so they're going to sacrifice this guy for their own benefit, right? To maintain their own position, their own status, the deal they have with Rome. They're going to let him go, whereas Jesus is intentionally giving himself for the better of others. They are going to sacrifice him for the betterment of themselves. So there's a very strong self-centeredness there. They're making virtuous arguments, particularly Caiaphas here. He's making a virtuous sounding argument. We got to save the people. We got to protect this nation. We can't have the Romans coming in and getting us. Here's his excuse for why this has to be done. But I'm going to say, I don't think that's the whole story. He's using that. It's very convenient, but these guys are corrupted. They're under the Roman Empire. It's a very corrupt system. In order to maintain their power, their position within the society, they have to stay under the Romans. That's the rule for them. If they went outside of Roman rule, they would be in trouble. So they see Jesus rising up. This is going to cause problems. But you can tell they're corrupt because in the very next chapter, it's not just Jesus they want to kill. They got to kill Lazarus too. We can't have this guy who's been raised from the dead running around saying Jesus healed him, brought him back from the dead. So they got to take out Lazarus too. This is corruption. And I mean, they totally are going off the rails according to their own law in order to preserve their position of power. So they have to stop what's going on, and they're willing to murder people to get it done. Verse 51, he did not say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So this is Caiaphas. He's in the position of high priest. It's a temporary role that he comes in and fills, just like our president comes for 4 years, maybe 8, and then they move on. He's in there for a temporary period of time. Now he has prophesied that this was going to happen, which it's really interesting. He's really kind of looking after his own interests, but at the same time, this prophecy comes true, right? But not in the way that he's saying it. Not in the way that he's predicting it. Verse 54, Jesus therefore no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there to the region near the wilderness to a town called Ephraim, and there he stayed with the disciples. Now, he's not hiding, right? He doesn't need to hide from anyone. And so that kind of keeps coming up. It's not his time. It's not right. It's not in alignment with God's will. Jesus stays on a mission 100% of the time. He is going to get away from these guys because there's a better timing for what's about to happen. Verse 55. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. So lots of people coming in. They were looking for Jesus and saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? That he will not come to the feast at all?" Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know so that they might arrest him. He's coming. He's coming in his time, right? And he's going to come in a big way. He's not hiding. They have no idea what they're getting themselves into. They are undone already. This whole plot to murder him, good luck with that. This guy has authority over life and death. He can lay down his own life and take it up again. You're going to kill that guy? This is a bad, bad idea, and killing him is not going to fix this. It's only going to make it a lot worse for them. But worse for them is better for the whole world, right? Because the glory of God is going to just shine bright to the entire world that Jesus is who he says he is. And he has this authority over life and death, and that we can trust him because he died for us even when we didn't deserve it. There was no redeeming quality in us that would make it worth him going to the death for, right? And we struggle with this so much because by our nature, we're very self-centered and like we always think, what's in it for me? Like, how does this affect me, right? Jesus thought of everyone else and what this would bring to the world. For God loved the world so much that he sent his only son. All right, we're going to close out in prayer. Thank you, Lord, for sending your son to die for us, Lord, even when we didn't deserve it. And Lord, that demonstrates that you are worthy, that you're trustworthy, that you have integrity, that you are pure, you are holy, you are perfect, and that we can trust you even when it comes to things like death, right? That your justice is perfect, that your accountability is perfect. You know what it is to be a human. You know what this experience, this life is like. You have seen and felt temptation, and you have overcome and have declared victory over evil. And Lord, that we can just trust you in that, and that you will guide us on a path that will bring us closer and closer to you. And Lord, we can just shed this world and all of its wickedness and live with you in eternity where things are perfect and pure. And so, Lord, I just ask that you touch each and every heart in this room to guide us along that path and to help us expose and get rid of any impurity that's within us so that we can get ever closer to you. In your name we pray. Amen.